fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I got another horror review for you. Kind of a random one. I was scrolling through Netflix, because I haven't been on there in a while, see if they put anything new on there, and I came across this film, which I have seen before, once when it first came out. Haven't seen it since, but it's one that's popped in my mind here and there throughout. And it's the 2015 Eli Roth film, Knock Knock. So I saw this probably 6 years ago. It's an erotic horror film. That's also a remake of the film Death Game from 1977, which I know I've seen. I don't remember much of it. If I have seen it, it was years ago. But it was written by Eli Roth, Guillermo Amido, Nicholas Lopez. He also produced it with a handful of people. And I just want to talk about Eli Roth for a second. It stars Keanu Reeves, Lorenza Izzo, and Ana de Armas. Eli Roth, he's one of those directors I'll put in the same category as like Rob Zombie, especially since they're horror filmmakers, where even though I'm not really a fan of either one, I used to be a big fan of Eli Roth and Rob Zombie. But just over the years, the more I watch their films and just the more films I see in general, I sort of like them less and less. I see the movies that come out I still check out their movies, because I do agree with what Cody Leach said about Rob Zombie is he sees a good horror film in each one of his movies. He sees the potential for a really good horror film. I can say that for Eli Roth as well. Every horror movie I see that they do, I see how it could work. I'm not saying I could write or direct a better one, but I see how, like, the concepts are good, just not executed very well. And for years, Eli Roth was the kind of director like Rob Zombie or like other directors like Tarantino or Kevin Smith, where everything he did, he wrote and directed. It was Eli Roth's Cabin Fever. It was from the mind of Eli Roth, Hostel. But then he directed Clown, which isn't an Eli Roth original. That was a fan-made trailer that he ended up making for real. I did not see his Death Wish remake. He directed this, which is another remake. He directed Green Inferno. I don't remember if he wrote that or not. That's not really a remake of Cannibal Holocaust. It's an homage to the Italian cannibal exploitation films. It just has a lot of nods to Cannibal Holocaust. Point being, I guess this will fall under the category of, like, it's Eli Roth doing a remake. He's taking some source material and making his version of it. I will say one thing Eli Roth has over Rob Zombie, even in this film, is because they both have a handful of signatures. They both use a handful of the same actors. They both have their kind of characters they always write. Rob Zombie always does the Deep South psychobilly, and Eli Roth has a lot of like the douchey frat boys kind of characters. And this didn't really have that. This felt if executed properly, this could have been a really mature Eli Roth film. Whereas I could say Lords of Salem is Rob Zombie's most mature and ambitious film compared to his other ones. I would still say Cabin Fever is my favorite Roth movie. Not just because it was the first one I saw or because it's his first one, but you know, I really see the horror fandom in that. You know, I see The Evil Dead, I see Dawn of the Dead, I see everything he loves about horror put into that. Hostel was way too disappointing and way too overrated to put above this. It's better than Hostel 2, which he directed. But Knock Knock still isn't that great of a film. It could have been one of those movies that's like the next big cautionary tale. Sort of like what The Hitcher did for picking up hitchhikers. There's a ton of movies about letting strangers into your home. It becomes a home invasion film. This could have been the taking strangers into your home for the modern generation, because FaceTime and social media does have a role in this. I was watching Brad Jones's midnight screenings review of this, and he was talking about how Keanu Reeves isn't really the right actor for this. I've never been a huge Keanu Reeves fan. I know I like him more as a person than I do an actor. I hear a lot of stories of how he's a great human being. But I mean, I do like Constantine. I'll say that. There's not a whole lot of Keanu Reeves movies I really enjoy. But, you know, it still feels, because this came out around the time of either the first or second John Wick. And Brad Jones thinks he was still kind of stuck as John Wick, and it didn't really fit. I could kind of see that. But he mentioned like Ethan Hawke or like some big 90s star, which Keanu Reeves is. The story is very simple, and it's the same as the 77 film, obviously. Keanu Reeves is this very devoted husband and father. It's Father's Day weekend. He celebrated with them in the morning, and now they're taking a beach trip for the weekend. He hurt his shoulder and had surgery. And now he's got to go through physical therapy, so he stays behind. They don't really go much into what's wrong with him. And then the first night alone, he gets a knock on the door. And it's these two beautiful young women, played by Lorenza Izzo, who was the lead in Green Inferno, who was also Eli Roth's wife at the time, and Ana de Armas as Genesis and Belle, respectively. It's pouring, they're soaking wet. They say, you know, they got dropped off at the wrong house. No one else is answering. We can't find this house. There's supposed to be a big party we're supposed to go to. Keanu Reeves invites them in. Well, they asked if they could use his computer. He said, well, I'll call you an Uber. Come inside. And then they ask if, you know, they can put something on because they're soaked. He says, we have some robes. I'll throw your clothes in the dryer. Your Uber will be here in 45 minutes. And there are scenes in this film that work. Not necessarily the acting, which I thought the acting was fine. I mean, Keanu Reeves did what he could. It did feel like he was going a little over the top sometimes. These girls just had to be annoying. That's all they had to do. And they succeeded. Anyway, they seduce him, and then they pretty much what about Bob him for like 2 days? They just will not go away. They keep annoying him, pestering him, finding ways to ruin his life because he cheated, had sex with them. It's that simple of a story, really. And like, one of the scenes that work is it becomes pretty clear what they're doing. After they give him their clothes, they put the robes on, and first they start casually talking about sex and sexual encounters they've had, and then it just becomes more and more upfront with it. So they're sitting in the living room, which has a lot of chairs. He'll be sitting here, they're sitting here, they'll be talking about something. We get the idea, he says he's 43, we get the idea I guess, misses his youth. You know, they look at his stereo and turntables. He said he used to be a DJ. It was really fun. It's more of a hobby. I haven't had a gig in years. I love music. They're admiring his vinyl collection. They touch his arm and they're like, oh wow, do you work out? You must work out all the time. That's really strong. They're filling it with compliments that you kind of get the idea he needs to hear. And that's nothing against his wife. His wife was also in Green Inferno. Ignacia Alamon. She was in Green Inferno as well. She was one of the blonde activists. I mean, they seem like a happy family. There's nothing wrong with the family. We just kind of get the idea he's sort of in this slump, sort of like this dry spell slump. It's not really depressing, but you know, they're filling him with compliments that I guess makes him feel young again. They're using that weakness to get to him. But every time they get closer, he gets up and he walks over to another chair, sits there, and they just keep moving all around the room. That's a scene that kind of worked, because it's just sort of building, not really tension, but it creates the uncomfortable, you know, how uncomfortable Keanu Reeves is. And his name is Evan in the film. And so they keep talking more about sex, complimenting him more about just, you know, you don't look 43, you're really strong, whatever. So then he goes to fetch their clothes, Uber's outside, he's knocking on the bathroom, they're not answering, he comes in, they're completely naked, and they seduce him. He keeps trying to say no, but they overpower him, and it goes to them both performing oral on him for him to finally relent. He was fighting it. And then we get this feels like forever sort of montage of threesome sex that they're having, which the way it's presented in this really like a darkly dramatic music that they're using, it kind of feels like a De Palma scene, which is probably the biggest compliment I could ever give Eli Roth. Was it made me kind of feel like I was watching, albeit maybe not one of his best, but a Brian De Palma film, because obviously what he's doing is wrong. Cheating on his wife with these two women in their bed, but also, unless you go into this movie 100% blind, you know, if you've seen trailers or whatever, you know these girls are bad. You know this decision is going to lead to a bunch of terrible shit happening. So it's this really dark, swelling music that fits. And it's going to help. It would help set the tone for the rest of the film. But then for the next day on, these girls are just on just critical mass of obnoxious. He wakes up, he goes downstairs. They made breakfast, but they trashed the kitchen. Like, you can see there's egg on the wall, banana peels everywhere. The girl Belle is eating, I think, cereal out of the dog bowl. Genesis is eating like pancakes and eggs, but like squirting the syrup in her mouth. Just making a mess, being loud and obnoxious. They put Keanu Reeves' wife is an artist. She makes sculptures. They drew. Sorry, I'm stuttering. Drew graffiti on it. You know, they drew dick and balls all over him. But, you know, he keeps trying to tell them they have to leave. They keep saying no. He says he's going to call the cops. And then they threaten him by saying, well, man, we're going to tell him that, you know, statutory rape because we're 15. And he's trying to piece it together. He's like, well, wait, because he believes that. They don't look 15 at all. He's like, well, wait, if you're 15, then you can't be flight attendants, because that's what they told him. And I do agree with what Brad and Brian said on Midnight Screenings. They said it's like the reverse Human Centipede. Because you have the two girls coming in from the rain for shelter, but they're the bad ones, not the lone guy in the house. And Keanu Reeves is not the smartest character. He falls for every trap. So yeah, oh, well, we're 15, and, you know, you're going to be a pedophile, statutory rapist. The blonde one even says, I'm not showered today, and I still have evidence in me. So that's awesome. Eventually, a family friend comes to the door. He answers it. But then she comes up behind him, like touching him. The friend leaves disgusted. The wife FaceTimes him, and they're making noise in the background. And then the whole pedophile thing is really a theme that carries through the whole film. Eventually, he threatens to report a break-in. That's when they sort of give up and say, well, can you give us a ride into town? Which he does. He shouldn't have. Like, he still wants to help him, or he's just desperate to get rid of him. Either way, he gives him a ride. He should have said, fuck you, you can walk. Drops him off in town. He goes back home. He cleans the best he can. He gets the graffiti off the statue or sculpture. And then they show back up. Genesis knocks him out with one of his wife's sculptures. He wakes up. He's tied to the bed. And you got Genesis just putting Reeves' wife's makeup on. Belle comes in his daughter's school outfit and drew freckles on her face. And starts having these, like, role-playing fantasies. Like, she's on top of him, slapping him. And I know people will look too deeply into this. Like, why did you do that, Daddy? Why do you touch me like that, Daddy? Slapping him. People will look into it and think, oh, so she has trauma from her childhood. Like, this movie doesn't deserve that kind of deep psychoanalysis. But eventually he gets an idea of how to get out of it. He sees his phone, so he goes to sit on it. But then it goes off. It's his wife FaceTiming him. They threaten to answer it unless he agrees to go along with whatever they want to do. Because they were about to answer it as they both start blowing him. So he's like, no, fine. Because I wanted to have sex again. So he's like, go ahead. So Belle gets on top, starts having sex with him, and he's kind of buying time, pretending to enjoy it, Well, Genesis films the whole thing. He does break free. One arm breaks free and he punches Belle off of him. Doesn't beat her to unconsciousness, just hits her off of him. He gets up and runs, happens to run right into Genesis. And so then he wakes up, he's tied to a chair with extension cord, and they're playing this annoying version of Jeopardy where all the questions are based on like the life of a pedophile. Like, our category is family. Like, how far away do you have to park to pick up your kids? Is it 200 meters, 500 meters, 2 miles? And they put these big headphones on him. And if he guesses wrong or doesn't guess at all, they crank this high frequency noise, pretty much making him go deaf. And then, what is the proper punishment for a pedophile? Is it, getting raped in prison every day, castration, or death? But at this time, a family friend of theirs who was also in Green Inferno, I want to get the guy's name, Aaron Burns. He's an associate of Keanu Reeves' wife. I guess he helps sell her art. And he's come to pick up the big sculpture. So they answer the door. They say they're his nieces. They're shooting a music video. Sees the sculpture. It's got a tarp on it, or like a sheet. He's like, this is supposed to be packaged and ready to go. This isn't right. Of course, they foreshadow because he takes his inhaler out, hits it, and then he gets up in their face like, no. He's like, I'm from Oakland. I ghetto ass bitches when I see him. So he knows they're up to something. He runs off to find Keanu Reeves, which first they get in a bit of a fight. And they're able to snag his inhaler. Runs to find Keanu Reeves, finds him in the bedroom, still tied up. And instead of untying him, and Keanu Reeves just keeps repeating, they're crazy, they're crazy. Instead of untying him, he hears this noise. So he quickly rushes out to see what it is and sees that they are smashing the wife's sculpture with hammers. So that overwhelms him. He tries to stop. He has an asthma attack. They show him, they have the inhaler. They're passing it back and forth. Slips on a chunk of sculpture, hits his head, dies. So then they take care of that by putting paper mache over him. And then they take his phone and they send a text from Evan's phone, Keanu Reeves' Evan's phone, to the guy Lewis's phone about how could you do this to me? How could you fuck my wife? You better disappear or you're dead. Don't ever come to my house again. Establishing a motive for why Reeves killed him when they find him. So then they finally tell him the proper punishment for pedophile is death. And this is when Keanu Reeves gets his big blow-up scene where, I was being nice. I let you in my house. It was raining. It was cold. You had nowhere to go. I dried your clothes. I called you a car. I asked you to leave. You wouldn't. And he pretty much compared them to just throwing themselves at him to free pizza. He was like, you were free pizza delivered to my door. What was I supposed to do? And then there's more problems. They say, well, punishment by death, you're to be executed at dawn. So he's tied to this chair. They're like outside, digging this hole for like hours. There's a shelf behind him that he keeps like trying to nudge because there's like this ceramic or something egg that's up there. He keeps trying to knock it down, which eventually it does get knocked down. Finds out there's a pistol in it, which there's no lid or anything. She must have made it around the gun. That's not the important part. The important part is he knew that was there. Why did he get it earlier? Why wait till you're tied up and everything is completely fucked up? But of course, when the girls find it, they decide to untie him and play hide and seek. You leave the house, you get shot. And he plays cat and mouse with them several times for several minutes. Then he runs outside. He trips over a dolly, like a push dolly. Gets brought back inside, tied up again. So now it's dawn. They have him tied up again. They put him in the hole. They bury him up to here. Oh, also they cut his hair. Ridiculously. Because the movie opens up with him and his wife in bed. And she makes a comment how he needs to cut his hair. It's too long. So we got it, foreshadowing. He got his hair cut. So they bury him up to his neck. And then they were like, your last lifeline out of this is call your wife and tell her everything. And then we'll leave. So they call her, get it all set up for him. He starts off legit, like, honey, I'm really sorry for what I'm about to tell you. Then he gives in, he starts panicking, screaming, call 911, call 911. They tell him it's his phone. You better watch out. You got to be careful with Facebook. Someone can get a hold of it. You know, you'll never know what they would post. And they post the video when he was tied to the bed and Belle was having sex with him. Conveniently at the part when he was playing along, screaming, oh yeah, yeah, like he was enjoying it. So then they set it down in front of him. And then as they leave, Genesis says, something about my birthday. I turn 22 next week. You know, and then we get this shot of Keanu Reeves' face, like moment of realization, like, I could have called the cops the whole time. No shit. If you believe that they were actually 15, wow. They don't look, no. He never should have believed that in the first place. But also, because there's also a montage right before, like while they're digging the hole and he's sitting in the chair, of them trashing the house. I mean, cutting up and destroying all of her artwork, putting graffiti all over every picture in the house, furniture, smashing everything everywhere, writing really graphic things on pictures of his kids and wife and drawing horns and faces all over everything. Completely wrecked the house. Like, is anyone gonna believe them? And especially, he's tied up. How would he tie himself up and then bury himself up to his neck? So, they didn't really make it, like, if they weren't going to use rape as their argument, they didn't do a very good job at making it look that way. So he's able to get, like, one hand free. He's trying to delete the video because people are already commenting on it. And he kind of moves the wrong way and he hits like instead. And as he hits like, he pushes the phone far away. And then we get the Fight Club ending, which is they're leaving. They take his dog, by the way. Dog named Monkey. They put a record on, grab the dog, they leave, and it's the Pixies' Where's My Mind? Fight Club song. As the camera pans around and we see everything they've done to the house, all the destruction and damage, everything. And so then the family comes home, they walk through the door, they kind of look at everything, and it just ends with the kids saying, Dad must have had a party. Because in the beginning, when they're having breakfast together, the guy Lewis comes over. Lewis makes a joke about super secret Father's Day party. So yeah, haircut and party all somehow had a payoff at the end. This movie's really frustrating because I see the potential. It could have been a movie like The Strangers, which I love. The Strangers. That's probably like my top 30 favorite horror movies of all time. I love The Strangers. They could have done that, but with this kind of story. It feels more like What About Bob or The Cable Guy, where they won't go away. It is really frustrating because I haven't had gritting my teeth, almost chest pain, anger, and hatred for characters like this. These are the kind of characters I would just love to see get their comeuppance. In the original film, spoilers, they walk away and they're hit by a vehicle and die, unrelated to everything else. But, it would have been great if, I know people will probably say, well, I hope they make another one where they show what happens. A whole movie for just a 5-minute clip of what happens? No. Eli Roth says he doesn't like doing sequels, but he did Hostel 2. And there was 2 more Cabin Fevers, and there was another Hostel that he didn't even do. So, no sequels to this. Probably never going to get one. It's not important anyway. But it's really frustrating. And then they tell them their whole plan, because they say, knock, knock, who's there? Evan. Evan who? Cheating eventually gets you killed. And they tell him, we thought you were going to be the one to say no, but no matter who they are, how much they love their family, they always say yes. And then Belle says, but you were my favorite. And it's just like, how far do they go? He should have asked that. To what end do you take no and accept it? Because they literally pushed it until they were both blowing him before he relented. Like, how much of a no do they need before they legitimately do fuck off? Or if they say no, do they then taunt and harass him the same way, but for saying no? It's like, hey, these are not clever, evil masterminds. They're just annoying. They're frustrating to watch, which, if that was the goal, succeeded completely. And it's one of those movies where if you really think about it, a lot of it just doesn't make sense. If they want to use He Raped Us as, their version, they should not have trashed his house. Oh, then they make the implication because Keanu Reeves does this thing with his kids like the monster. It's laughable. But it shows he's a good dad. And the thing, Keanu Reeves isn't a bad guy in this movie. Just he gave in to the temptation. And that's the lesson to be learned, I guess. But then they do the monster voice. And he asks how they know about it. Couldn't find they've been spying on him already. And he's like an architect, so they stomp and wreck all of his models, his wife's, all of her artwork. Just totally just decimate everything. wait, why wreck the house if you're trying to hold the leverage of, we'll call you a rapist. If you're trying to hold that above him, why wreck his house and make it look like, do all these things that make it so it's obviously not Reeves doing it to himself, like tying himself up and then burying himself up to his neck. Or if Reeves knew the gun was in that egg, why not get it sooner? Why, just, this movie had potential, it did, but at the same time, the characters were just too fucking annoying. They weren't really clever or intimidating enough. I mean, I'll give credit to Kathy Bates in Misery, a very different story, but that movie had tension. You never knew when she was going to flip. Here, there is none of that. They're obnoxious all the time. So much so that when there's no payoff, when there's no comeuppance, it's really frustrating. And there are certain things that work. I mean, I did like the way, the montage of them having sex for the first time with that music. The same music was used when they were digging the hole and just completely demolishing the house. It's got that sort of De Palma, tension-filled feel to it. Weak De Palma, but still De Palma. It's, good enough to say that. It does feel different than, it is probably one of the lesser Eli Roth films, but I didn't think this was as bad as a lot of other people do. I know it didn't get that great of reviews. The reviews I've seen, however, really despised this film. I didn't think it was as bad. I find it watchable. It's just really frustrating. There was no revenge or comeuppance. Like, I would have loved to see them get, even if they don't get killed, but just like arrested and then just, see how everything wraps up for them. But whatever. Yeah, I would like to check out the original film again at some point, but I don't know. But anyway, that is Eli Roth's Knock Knock. I don't know how I'm gonna... It'll probably be a rant, regardless, but I actually thought this was gonna be a much bigger rant than it was, but oh well. So, Eli Roth's Knock Knock. Thank you for watching.